I felt that the whole environment around me responded very intensely, and I had finished giving my little ritualistic speech, and I opened my eyes, and directly in front of my eyes a bear crossed my path, which
Wow.
was just like startling. And you see bears now and again, but not commonly. And this is a perfect example of how I felt fear that electrified the whole experience.
Hello, and welcome to the Spirit Box podcast, where we explore folklore, magic, the world of the spirits, and everything in between. Today, I sit down with Chad Andro, the host of the fantastic podcast Radical Elphame, to talk about his journey into witchcraft, animism, and the search for right relation in these difficult times that we have living inside the imperial system. Chad reflects on an early entheogenic experience, which he felt awakened him and really pushed him in his eventual move away from chaos magic towards traditional witchcraft, fairy lore, and a more primal, land rooted practice shaped by initiation rather than belief. We explore animal encounters as genuine moments of spiritual threshold, bears appearing during ritual, deers as initiators, and the presence of wolves, foxes, and owls in our magical work. Our conversation moves through symbolism, shamanic experience, and the difficulty of maintaining spiritual seriousness in a modern, distracting world. We also reflect on what it means to practice witchcraft beyond self improvement, and how magic can force a reckoning with fear, responsibility, and moral consequence. In the plus section of the episode, our conversation turns to Chad's work as a winemaker, and we talk about the meaning of offerings that have been crafted and stewarded by your own hand. Chad explains how wine, intention, labour, and land become inseparable in devotional magic, and shares the thinking behind a recent occult focused wine release designed to be worked with rather than imbibed or collected. From there, we move into podcasting and writing as acts of discipline and devotion, Chad's Substack work, and the writers currently shaping his thinking, including Leah Morgan's A Deed Without a Name. And we end up talking frankly about empire, exhaustion, and the uneasy possibility that real transformation, both personal and collective, may only come through collapse, and what it means to try to remain in right relation as that process unfolds. It's a deep and rich conversation, and I'm really grateful for Chad's insight. It was a pleasure talking to him. Okay, let's get on with the show. Chad Andro, it is a real pleasure to welcome you to the Spirit Box. How are you?
Doing good. It's an honor to be here. A long-time listener, first-time guest. So, yeah, very stoked.
Well, it's really lovely to have you here, and like I'm a fan of your show as well.
Oh,
I
thank you.
think it's awesome. You always a fantastic caliber of guests, and you're a great interviewer. So Radical Elphame is the name of your show, and we'll get into that in a second. But to help get the show moving, could you tell the people a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess right now I am primarily in the realms of the occult and magic, a podcaster. That's like the main thing I'm putting out there. I've been dabbling in some writing as well through Substack, which has been fun. I kind of feel like in a lot of ways doing this podcast has been an avenue to feeling more confident about writing,
Right.
to stress test a lot of my own ideas by talking with people I admire, to, yeah, kind of get to the quintessence of them, maybe challenge them a bit, that sort of thing. And yeah, in my normal life, I make wine, which is, it's kind of a alchemical process, but otherwise not all that occulty. And it frees up a lot of time for me to be listening to audiobooks and podcasts and stuff. So that's been a lot of how I've been able to go pretty deep into these subjects, even as an adult who wasn't that into magic in my earlier days. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Just to kind of pull the thread in that last bit a bit. When did this start for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the earliest place that I could point to would be an entheogenic experience I had when I was 18 that really broke me open. And at the time, I would call it very traumatizing. But in retrospect, I see it now more as very initiatory.
Right.
There was spiritual elements to it that are a core part of my practice now that I experienced then, but I had no tools to process it at all. So it became something I more tried to recover from for many
Right.
years.
Right.
And and then, funny enough, the way I think magic in particular really kicked off for me was after many years of being very interested in like the Fortean, for lack of a better word,
Hmm.
Terence McKenna, Jacques Vallée, that sort of thing,
Right.
which seemed to hint at some of my own experience in that kind of entheogenic state. It was through Hellier coming out that I really felt a strong compulsion to go deeper than just more of that armchair researching kind
Right.
of approach. And it's funny because I became very, very interested in that show and the ideas they put forth in it. And it was searching for a podcast talking about it that I found your show.
Oh, no
And
way.
you did that episode with, I think, Marcos Visconti and Mana Alin back in the day where you were kind of having a roundtable about it. And so, interestingly enough, that's what brought me to your show. And honestly, your show has been very foundational in some ways plotting my own path and being introduced to certain writers and thinkers. But also, I find the way you have been so open in addressing your own experiences to be something that's helped me deal with my own as they've evolved and continued. So, thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for the kind words. Like, if I could want for anything for my show to be is to help guide people in those footsteps, because basically I was living those first footsteps, on via podcast. But yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, well, you certainly picked up the ball and really run with it. I mean, as I said, you've a very high caliber show. Your Substack writing is really interesting too.
Thank you.
Um, so, how has doing the show helped you? Like, is like you said, testing out your ideas, or are you learning when
Mhm.
you're talking to people?
Yeah, totally. It's helped me in huge ways because there's a lot of like key foundational mysteries in my own practice, which I wouldn't say our practices are like one to one, but I think they're
Yeah.
similar in a lot of ways.
Right.
And sorry, and I would say some of the key kind of foundational mysteries that I haven't been able to find clear answers to in my own research or in the people I've talked to. For one, is this notion of the pull towards witchcraft, but then also trying to find meaning in that is not malefic or
Yeah.
dark,
Yeah.
which I feel, but a lot of what I encounter in reading and speaking to people is counter to that. So trying to understand that has been a really important part for me. And then similarly, trying to explore what fairy is
Hmm.
in a way that also I think can be constructive and meaningful and not merely either like a category of paranormal or something not for humans.
Right.
So those two like big questions are like I would say a foundation of a lot of where my questions come from and the guests I choose. And it's not only that. If you listen to my show, there'll be many episodes where those things are only hinted at, but I have been able to build out a lot of ideas around them through talking to people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. One of the things that I found is that you accelerate quickly because you get to have, a one-on-one for an hour and a half, 2 hours with people who are really, really well versed and very experienced. Like, it's almost like a weird. evening school in
Hmm.
in witchcraft, like, or in magic and the esoterica more broadly. But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from with that. Um, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I'm sure you experience this too, but it really pushes you because you can't look like an idiot asking questions in front of these talented people. So, whereas in my normal life, I might be like, oh, I'll read that book over the next 6 months. If you set up an interview, you're like, oh, no, I have to read that book now.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I have to come
totally.
up with thoughtful ideas about it, which completely changes how you process something. It's not as
Hmm.
relaxed or casual. So,
Not
that's
at
been
all.
really
Yeah,
beneficial, I find, too, to accelerate, like you
yeah,
say.
yeah. You do. You have to study the books, or you become good at reading things quickly for sure. But like
Hmm.
as you say, you have to be able to kind of unpack ideas, or even the ones you can't unpack, be able to phrase a reasonable question
Yeah.
to get them unpacked. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very familiar. I don't know about not sounding like an idiot. I'm convinced I sound like a moron all the time.
I feel the same way. When I listen back to the recordings to edit them, I feel compelled to like edit everything I say. And like the guests, I'm like, oh, it's fine. And I hate the way I say like all the time. I'm like, I sound like a valley girl in the mall. Like, damn it. But I was born in California. I can't help it. I just say like.
Have you picked up any other like throwaway phrases that you cringe a little
Kind
bit with?
of. I
Yeah.
say kind of all the time. It's a filler word or a filler phrase.
Yeah.
But I will look at a sentence of mine and be like, I just did like.
Mm.
I'll say, if I took out like and kind of, that sentence would be very intelligent sounding. But because I've included these filler words, I sound kind of like I'm bumbling around.
Yeah, yeah.
Just part of why I like writing, frankly, because you can really hone it in and make it sound good.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, there's like the like thing is a thing in the west of Ireland as well. Like,
Oh,
there you go.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of they say it in
Yeah,
English. So
okay.
my worst one though is interesting, right? Like, because
That's way better.
I genuinely find something interesting, but I find myself going,
Yeah.
interesting. I'm like, and then I listen back when I'm doing the show. I'm like, oh, shut the fuck up, dude. Jesus, why do you just say that all the time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a painful experience editing yourself, I find. That's the hardest part of doing the podcast for me. Everybody else is usually pretty great and they do a good job. But yeah, it's humbling.
For sure, for sure. So, what is it in particular about fairy that you found yourself drawn to?
Yeah, it's funny because for somebody who has a podcast with Elpham in the title, I think I am a very unlikely person to be as interested in fairy as I am now, which is part of why I take it so seriously because it's a compulsion that I find strange. Um, I would say that that experience I had, this kind of initiatory entheogenic experience, the best way I've been able to process it since then over time was through the kind of Fortean view of fairy. It seemed to explain things about it and what I
Right.
experienced and how it felt. And so ever since that dot was connected for me that, oh, there might be something in these interpretations of this type of mythology and experience that said something about what I went through, that I've seen it as much bigger than the way I think a lot of people approach it, as some people look at it very specifically as like, well, it is an Irish cryptid type thing, or something like that,
Mm.
or it's a nature spirit. It's these
Yeah.
very segmented things, and when you start broadening it out to fairy as otherworld, as just the wider spiritual experience, and what that strange liminality says about then the wider spiritual experience, it's become something that to me is kind of foundational to how I see things like animism and how I even like to me witchcraft and fairy are intrinsically connected.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, I think the fact that as time went on, I felt compelled to go deeper into it has made me want to look even closer. And it was after kind of being really lit up by Hellier, deciding that I wanted to get out of the armchair position and start being more involved in magic, It was Sounds of Infinity by Lee Morgan.
Sure.
That was my gateway, because it was about this topic that I had previously looked at in a Fordian lens, but they were coming to it from a specifically witchcraft and practitioner approach
Right.
perspective. And it was from that I then read Deed Without a Name, which was their previous book just about traditional witchcraft. And I had before then never heard about that phrase, traditional witchcraft. Wicca had always only come to me through the more pop expression, so it wasn't very appealing to me. And what I found in their book was this very strange expression of this, for lack of a better word, almost like dark shamanistic experience that really deeply resonated, and then gave you kind of a sort of cosmological framework to build a practice around, which I found super helpful and empowering, as opposed to what I'd encountered before then, which was a lot more on the either eclectic or chaos magic bent,
Hmm.
which just never could fully engross me enough to dive in.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think I went all over the place with that answer, but yeah.
No, no, I get what you're talking about. I mean, I think I ended up in the same place. Um,
Hmm.
like I was playing around with chaos magic for years, like really, ever since I saw Grant Morrison
Yeah,
do his talk, well, probably in the very early 2000s.
yeah.
Um, and I was reading Terence McKenna kind of around then as well. And I definitely went down that path, but it never hooked me like
Hmm.
like the way traditional witchcraft, folk witchcraft, whatever you want to call it, because I think these things are very individualistic, really.
Yeah.
Um, in the way that has, and I think this for me, it's something a lot more visceral about it, so like
Hmm.
primal, um, and well, for whatever reason that resonates. But yeah, I looked at some ritual magic stuff as well, very low level
Hmm.
stuff in like Telema. It just it didn't have that impact, you know, that the witchcraft did. Um, so yeah, I hear what you're saying. I recognize the crooked path. Yeah,
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 it's funny because I think part of it for me, and it sounds like maybe for you too, was the element in particular of traditional witchcraft as opposed to that more pop version of Wicca, which I know is not the whole of Wicca. I don't mean to
yeah,
denigrate or anything like that. Um, there is that kind of fundamental heretical element to it, at least in its kind of expression and aesthetics. That I think there's an element to the fear that makes it come alive.
yeah,
That if you take that out, it's harder to, as a modern adult with a job and a lot of distractions, to really get sucked in and believe it and
hmm,
feel it.
hmm,
That was my experience. I don't think I could have gone full on into ceremonial magic and gotten that same result personally. That's
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
me.
yeah. No, that's a fair comment. And I do know what you mean. There's a threshold there,
Hmm.
and even as a modern, with all the kind of, you know, culture that you're immersed in, that
Yeah.
threshold still has a true sense of dread and a true sense of power. You know,
Hmm.
and it's I don't think it's for everybody.
Yeah.
But it's that I think that true sense of power, and maybe it's because we well, I grew up in a Christian country, so like
Hmm.
that symbolic language is embedded in me. So it's going to
Yeah.
have some potency. I think there's residual effects of that for most people in the Western world who come from a Christian background. They're going to have some of that symbolism inside them. Um, Maybe that's where some of the impact comes from. I don't know, but certainly
Yeah.
there's a sense of power and something, a tangibility, a realness to the magic that I never really got with anything else.
Yeah. I think it's funny that if you do the trajectory that a lot of people, at least in my cohort in life have done. You kind of are raised sort of religious. A lot of
Yeah.
people are like kind of half-assed religious.
Yeah.
I call it like suburban Christianity. That's what I was raised in.
Mm.
And then you go towards like agnosticism, atheism, typically. And then when you if you encounter spirituality at that point, it's from this kind of like agnostic lens. It's kind of
Mhm.
there's not a lot of religion to it because most people in the West at that point in their lives don't want religion. They're kind of getting past that and see it as small-minded or what have you. And I feel like traditional witchcraft kind of comes to you and says, but what if the bad guy in that story you used to believe is real,
Yeah.
but it's different than you were told?
Hmm.
And that kind of awakens some of the enchantment of youth of believing in some of those religious stories, but in a subverted way,
Yeah.
which feels all sorts of ways. You
Mm.
know,
Mm.
that was kind of my experience, I think.
Yeah. It's a difficult not to unpick. Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. For sure. No, I like the way you put that there. I think it'll make a lot of sense for people listening. Um,
Yeah.
you know, um, and I think the kind of the watchword is, it's not easy to navigate. You know,
Hmm.
but that's part of it.
Yeah.
You know, that's part of what makes it meaningful.
Yeah, I think for me, if I just like looked at the past 5 years of where my practice has gone and changed and evolved, and even the way spirits have come to me and how they've communicated and what type of like mythopoetics they've used to communicate with me, it has not been static at all. It has been growing and changing and taking me to places I never would have expected at all, which leads me to believe you know, you need to be open to these things. And I don't think these spirits are just one expression and it's not all dark, but that darkness and that chthonic side could be very useful and maybe important
Mhm.
for us at a certain point. And I think potentially our culture being so removed from letting that in means that that's a first step for a lot of us potentially to then be able to get to different places, different expressions, and be open to that.
Mhm.
At least that's how it was for me.
Okay. Um, Now, I know a lot of listeners will have heard me talk about myself continually. So probably had enough of that. But I'm really interested to ask you how you made that first step. I mean, I appreciate there might be elements that you don't want to share, or indeed kind of taboo to share. But
Hmm.
even from an emotional or a psychological approach, or the whole package, like what was that like? What was that kind of okay? I'm jumping in with both feet now.
Yeah, I'd say that I felt weirdly assured in trying to dive in with both feet, which was part of the mystery to me because I'm like, some of this feels weird and kind of spooky. Why am I so confident that like you should
Mm,
go into the woods and do X, Y, and Z
mm,
and accept whatever comes? But that was completely how it felt to me. Um, and so the first thing that I did, besides very small little expressions of magic, I guess you could say, that were more like eclectic, but to be like proper, like I'm going to try to follow this path. And I'm reading books by like Jim McGarry or Nigel Pearson, and they're presenting a way to do that. And so now I'm going to attempt that myself.
mhm,
And it was doing the red meal, the red housel offering in the woods at night. And I was very ritualistic about it, set things up and in a way that was very aesthetic and intense, and did an offering of wine and bread, and kind of did my own rendition of a spell and a ritual. And it was this strange moment where I felt I felt that the whole environment around me responded very intensely. And I had finished giving my little ritualistic speech, and I opened my eyes, and directly in front of my eyes a bear crossed my path, which was
wow.
just like startling And you see bears now and again, but not commonly. And this is a perfect example of how I felt fear that electrified the whole experience. And I felt legitimate fear for my life at that point because I'm like, wow, what if this bear's coming here? I'm here in the dark. I have a lantern. And the bear kind of walked by. And then I continued on with what I was saying. And I'm kind of in the woods, but adjacent to a field. And I give the next part, and I start to hear owls hooting right in conjunction with me saying this piece. And I'm like, okay, very interesting. There's another response. I give a next part, and I start to hear coyotes howling. This is within like 5 minutes, and it was just so insane. It was so clear and insane that from that point on, I was able to approach most of my like ritualistic experiences with a level of belief that made things, I think, just start to flow and work
Right.
really quickly. And that included when I would try to do more like divinatory things, or communing with spirits. I just really stopped doubting things as much because of that experience. And I think I find doing it in nature, like you even described, it really changes everything. I think in some ways, I think nature is it's almost like something that can be ensouled because it's a living thing. So it's different than doing it in a house where you're hoping that a flame reacts, or smoke reacts. If you're out in the woods, that whole living ecosystem can react. It can be, I think, potentially worked with or manipulated by a spirit to communicate with you. And that to me was incredibly potent and told me something about like what the nature, I think, of what witchcraft is personally.
What an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that.
It was crazy. Yeah. I got a few of those.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's one thing that I'm in I'm in two minds about, because one part of my mind, like, I'm so envious that you have access to um like incredible species like that,
Yeah, it is pretty weird.
you
Yeah.
know, whereas I mean, there's no bears or or
Yeah.
wolves here anymore, and I'm equally quite grateful for that. That must have been a hell of a thing to hold your nerve in.
I literally got up and walked away and grabbed a stick because I was like, I might need to defend
Yeah,
myself. I wish I could pretend that I was so like
yeah,
spiritually engaged that I was like, oh, the bear is here to talk to me. But no, I was like, oh, fuck, this was
yeah,
a bad idea.
yeah,
That
totally,
was my first
totally,
response.
totally.
Then when other animals started responding at specific points and stopping is when I started to feel more like, okay, this is weirder than just
Yeah,
a strange like encounter with an animal at night. And since then, I have not seen a bear again in a ritual, and I'm kind of happy about that. But I've had similar things like that where I do a ritual. Usually they're like mainly offerings. It's not like I'm out there saying I want to get whatever, get something. It's more of a devotional thing,
yeah.
and multiple times I've had similar types of intense experiences. But I do feel very lucky. I talk about it on my show a lot. I live next to Mount Shasta, which is already a very weird place
Sure.
and very, very kind of spiritually supercharged type place, but it's super remote.
Right.
So you will see bears and bald eagles, and there are wolves. So it's just as a person who spent his whole life in the suburbs, I just feel grateful to be here now. Frankly,
Yeah.
it's not something I got to experience growing up.
Yeah. Well, that sounds amazing. And I think, kind of circling back to when we talk about that threshold, and
Yeah.
like that visceral fear, um, not just from the kind of the ritual and kind of what you're doing, kind of the threshold you're going to stand on spiritually, but the context of the natural environment at night, at midnight,
Hmm.
8 a.m. when people do these things, is such an amplifier for the atmosphere. It's very hard to describe, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people can achieve those things in other environments, but I'm kind of similar to you in that sense that I just think that outdoors there's a vulnerability that's different,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that you have to kind of get through. Um, yeah, it's hard to describe. It's so fucking intense.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I
yeah,
think, yeah, totally. I think culturally, it's really hard to shake all the distractions in our life, with phones and
hmm
most of us working more hours than we really probably should be, and families and responsibilities that to get to a worldview where magic can be real, I think is not easy.
hmm
It takes quite a bit. So I think if nothing else, putting yourself in that vulnerable threshold position is a really good way to accelerate that process, if nothing else.
yeah, yeah, true, true.
Yeah.
Um, so when you mentioned three different species that turned up or kind of vocalized when you were there,
hmm
um, have those relationships developed in any way? Have they turned up in dream work or anything like?
Yeah, yeah, actually, most of them in different ways, for sure. So weirdly, the owl, I have a very, very long going relationship with one particular spirit. So that spirit, that is more or less their totem,
Mm,
that comes in dreams, but also in the real world. So when I hear owls hooting now, if I'm doing anything,
mm,
I will stop and see if I can get a sense of what's going on, if there's something
right.
being communicated. In a perfect world, I try to intuit that, but also pendulums and tarot, like whatever.
Yeah.
If it's happening during a ritual, I'm always like, okay, it's working.
Mm,
I've had some of my crazier experiences doing ritual type stuff where an owl is then present, and I'm like, okay, it's on.
right.
And then other crazy things follow.
Mm,
The coyotes are definitely something that I work with on that very like mercurial trickster level. That coyote as like a god for the native people that literally live here and lived here. That was one of their primary deities. So I'm not saying that I am working with the exact same coyote that they were. I'm
yeah.
not saying that,
Yeah.
but that energy here has a really powerful presence.
Right.
And when you hear it, do you have coyotes
No.
in Ireland?
No.
It's such a because it's not all the time and it's very periodic, and it's usually because you'll hear them because they caught something and they're killing it,
Right.
and they just make the craziest. It's like blood curdling but kind of beautiful
Mm,
because it's so like powerful and loud. When they're howling like that, it's more of like calling all the coyotes to come get a bite, basically, is what's
right.
happening.
Right.
And that's been very potent. And that has been also a specific spirit I work with, kind of expresses that the coyote is something they like to use in dreams in particular.
Right.
Um, yeah. And then the bear has become a bigger symbol that slowly over time, through a lot of personal gnosis, has kind of led me to this personal like cosmological view of like the Big Dipper and the pole star, and sort of a shamanic interpretation of what that is for my practice,
Mm,
which maybe wasn't why that bear crossed my path that day, but it
mm,
feels significant.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting the kind of the rabbit holes that you go down when you
hmm
have those connections with an animal in a
Yeah.
spiritual context. My
Do you
area.
have that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. With wolf and bear actually, but more so the wolf.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, where that's brought me to though is looking at things like the Scandinavian
Hmm.
the berserkers that they would kind of
Mm.
start to embody that the nature of those animals in a rage for
Yeah.
battle, that kind of thing, what was what was going on there, um like also kind of finding out interesting things like the word for one of the words for wolf in Gaelic is Mochtir, which means
Mm.
son of the land. which
Mm.
is just got a beautiful poetry to it, really.
Yeah.
Um, kind of. I guess when you start to think about those things, but when you've got a slightly different interpretation because you have some kind of spiritual connection with those animals, you
Yeah.
you think about them in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I suppose a kind of a more I, animistic to a degree, but also there's a kind of a poetry to it. Right,
Yeah.
that there's that kind of you're thinking about things in a more poetic sense of symbolism and metaphor and what these things not necessarily mean, but what they kind of
Mm-hmm.
give you. What's that kind of
Yeah.
sense that you get from things? Um, and that's been a really interesting thing to explore.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I think like finding that archetypical level of an animal is really interesting. Like the
Mm.
animal itself is one thing that you can
Mhm.
engage with in one way. Then the archetypical level is another, and the myth related to that, it just
Mhm.
goes so deep. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, taking it all the way is pretty cool.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I had kind of more that direction of that, like embodying an animal sense. I had a vision working with a particular spirit that presented a fox to me in like trance, and I was like,
Right.
"Oh, interesting. That's a witchy animal. Cool. What's this
Mm.
mean?" I didn't really have a frame of reference for it though. And then within like a week, there was a fox that was hit on the road right by our house, which is not that significant, except for the fact that I had never seen a fox here after living here for
Right.
years ever. And the other thing that happens a lot is that and my wife probably wouldn't want to hear this, but a lot of times she will bring things to my attention when I'm supposed to be paying attention
Right.
that otherwise I might have brushed off. And
Mm.
so I was at home, she was taking the kids to school. She texted me and she said, "Hey, there's a fox that's dead on the road. You might want to grab that. You might want to look at that," because she knew I was kind of interested in foxes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like, "Huh, good point." And so I get this fox that's fully pristine. There's not any, wounds. It's not like hasn't been there very long.
Wow.
And so I was like, "Oh, got it." So that's in the process of getting turned into a pelt that I'm going to try to use
Right.
on like a visionary level.
Yeah.
So that's something I haven't really encountered in like a ritual
Mm.
per se, but it is something that was kind of brought to my attention that I've been trying to process and work
Mm.
through, and that's been cool too.
Yeah. 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 Totally. Yeah, as you say, you think about these things differently, right?
Yeah,
You know, and that it's a totally it's totally bizarre when you reflect back on it. And I probably like I wager the you from 5 years ago, similarly for me would have just been like, okay, it's roadkill, whatever. He's like
hmm
but now it's totally different. And that's one of the wonderful things I find about this is that enchantment that it
hmm
is brought to my life. It's really enriched it. There's a texture that wasn't there before. That I think I had a lifelong yearning for, but didn't know what it
yeah,
was. Couldn't kind of pin it down. But
yeah,
I certainly feel that way.
yeah. I'm completely there, and that's the thing. Yeah, that is for whatever reason, it's that witchcraft lens that allowed me to be vulnerable to go there,
Hmm.
and to be compelled to do that,
Hmm.
which is part of why I find it so like meaningful in a lot of ways. It seems like other people can get that from just straightforward religion, honestly, which is
Yeah,
great. It
yeah,
just like hasn't worked for me.
yeah. Same. Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting. So, circling back to your show, um,
yeah.
have any weird things ever happened on your show?
It's funny because I had you on within the first handful of episodes. I
Mm.
remember, and you kind of mentioned that you were like, just so you know, like now that you're doing the show, you're putting things out there, and I was like, oh, huh. Honestly, I don't I wish I had a good story. Not really. Like nobody has ever said like I see a spirit behind you. No, there's never been like crazy
I,
crazy malfunctions where I'm like,
yeah.
"Oh shit, we shouldn't be talking about the spirit." Maybe I need to have different guests on the show to really stir some shit up. So no, like honestly, not really. I'd say things have happened on the show very textually, like conversations I have, and like some of the first episodes were about things that I would not have considered important or like a big part of my own practice.
Right.
And then now, almost 2 years later, I go like, oh man, like that is so foundational to a thing I now do.
Right.
Or like somebody talks about a certain kind of myth, and I'm like, huh, that's kind of new to me. Tell me about it. And now I'm like, oh, that myth is something I go to all the time, and it says something
Right.
about a spirit of mine that's key.
Hmm.
So that has been pretty cool and interesting to watch evolve over time. But yeah, yeah, no, like spooky stories per se.
Your favorite child. That's what that is, you know?
Exactly.
You don't have to
Oh
get your
man.
knuckles wrapped.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hey. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, it's been cool though. Yeah, it's been I would never have guessed I would have a podcast in the past. So it's
Yeah.
put me in a position to put myself out there in a way that I never would have thought to. It was very similar to like the way you describe your inspiration to write your book. It was kind of a similar thing, different spirit, but a
Yeah.
similar type of nod to you need to do a thing, you need to make a thing.
Hmm.
And my actual first instinct was, should I write something? But I just knew my life at that time, because this would have been in like 2021 or something.
Right.
I was like, I don't have time for this. Like, I can't sit down and write a
Yeah.
book. And I was like, I don't even think I have anything to say that's that
Mhm.
important or significant. And so going through the process of elimination, trying to commune with the spirit, it was like, well, you listen to podcasts all the fucking time. Why don't you try that? And I was
Mhm.
like, all right, we can do that. So that's kind of how it was born. Was just finding something that would be sort of a devotional act
Mhm.
in multiple ways, because it's
Yeah.
a devotional act by putting the time and the energy into this project that is trying to collate ideas
Mhm.
that this spirit I think thinks are important and allows me to learn, but also hopefully allows other people to learn something too, not just from
Yeah.
me, but
Yeah.
from the people and the way I ask questions potentially.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think like there seems to be a connection with creative endeavor in this area
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
seems to go hand in hand with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I agree with that.
I wouldn't be surprised if that book does come along at some stage.
Yeah. We'll see. I'll see if it's, I think the hardest part now, when I first had that thought, would say I wouldn't have enough to say, would have been my thought. Now it's more like I don't know if I have time in my life with two young children to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
actually sit down and just do it. You know, it's so hard. That's why I have really enjoyed these Substack essays, because it's
Mhm.
a really small thing. You pick one focus, and you're doing maybe like 8 pages or something, and you try
Right.
to condense it down. So you're still really grappling with an idea, but you're not trying to connect it to like 1,000 ideas in one thing.
Yeah.
But maybe someday for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think something you said there about like that not sure exactly what you want to say
Hmm.
is is shows a lot of self awareness, but b it was explained to me by oh, what's his name, Gary Lockman,
Oh yeah.
um because I was talking to him about writing, um about kind of approaching my next book, and I've got like, well, I've got a couple of
Mm.
ideas, and he
Hmm.
said, and it really stayed with me. He said, like, you, when you're sure what you want to say, it'll be ready.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, right. So
Hmm.
that kind of it coalesces. This the shape will
Yeah.
come, and then you know it. Then it's go time.
Yeah. I love that. That's
Yeah.
really good advice.
Mm.
Yeah. That's it's really been kind of recent for me, but I've started to feel the sense just in these essay forms that
Mm.
there's things that I feel like compelled to say, not just that I'm interested in
Yeah.
writing something, but to where I'm like, oh, I feel like it's important I say this, not because the idea is important, because that sounds like egotistical. That's not what I mean. I just feel like there's something that I have to say that I haven't found elsewhere, maybe, or something like that.
Hmm.
And it's probably more insight that has nothing to do with me. that I would like to be able to put out there, frankly.
Yeah.
Because that's a different feeling whenever you're writing something that you feel compelled to write versus writing something as an exercise that's intellectual
Oh yeah,
primarily.
you're absolutely right. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking like in a way you've got the insight, like you've done it already. Like you're bang on the target.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's been like super recent, but I'm doing this like 5-part series that honestly it's not like super ambitious or anything, but
Mm,
it is collating a lot of these insights that I've kind of been knocking around for a few years. So
mm.
it does feel kind of like I feel like they've been stress tested enough to at least be presented as speculation, and that's really exciting. And I feel like really into that. So I'm
Oh,
looking
that's
forward
cool.
to getting that all out there. Right now, it's like 1 of 5 that I've put out, but
Hmm.
that'll be my first real entree into putting something out that I'm compelled to write, I'd say, which is cool. I did 2 last year that were more just trying to remember what it was like to even write something. Like
Mm.
since college, it's like, wait, what's it like to formulate sentences in large forms? I do a little bit for my day job because
Mm,
I like write tasting notes and wine club releases and stuff like that.
mm,
But it's a little different when you're
mm.
quoting scholarly documents and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been fun.
I was just thinking there, given the nature of your actual role, like you must have some great offerings for spirits.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of a joke.
Yeah.
I give wine like it's ice water. Like, and yeah, it's honestly kind of embarrassing. I just, especially if I feel like I fucked up, I'm just like, here, have 3 bottles of wine. I'm so sorry. You know what I mean? Like, I really didn't keep to that schedule of offerings, and
Mm.
damn, and so I'm pretty liberal in that regard. It's kind of hilarious. Nobody would understand unless they had my job, some of the things I've given to spirits. Yeah. Yeah.
Like seriously good quality wine.
Yeah. I mean, I like it anyways. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely not like the bottom shelf,
That's
And most of
brilliant.
it's stuff I made, which is again for me,
That's
that's
really
just
cool. That's really
yeah, it's
cool.
practical,
Yeah.
because I'm like, well, I own it, therefore it's actually some
Mm.
of the cheapest wine I can have is the stuff I made.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you give an offering and you're like, and I offer you wine
Mm.
made by my own hand, suddenly it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Um, it's been fun. It's been cool, and I don't know. Maybe that's part of the luck I've had getting some really potent responses. Is just
Yeah.
that type of thing. I don't know.
Well, I think there's something to that. I really do. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, from kind of my Patreon that like
yeah,
all the kind of the food I grow and the herbs I grow and
hmm
process and all that stuff. I again, it could be all in my head, but like I absolutely believe that if I'm doing ritual work and I'm using literally plants I sowed and harvested myself, that there is a more potent relationship than going down to Tesco's and picking it up off the shelf. There absolutely is. And also, it's grown and cared for in a different. It's a totally different way. You have a different relationship with
yeah.
the offering.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, it's it's alive and active for you, even just on so many levels
Hmm.
because of your relationship with it too. Not to mention the gift that would be to a spirit of
Hmm.
wow, look at you cultivated this.
Hmm.
You've shown an interest to do a task that most of the people in your contemporary life don't do anymore.
Hmm.
It's not that common to really grow your own food.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think it probably lights things up for you in the giving and then also the receiving. So that makes
Hmm.
perfect sense.
Hmm.
That's something I have an ambition to do that I haven't done as much is growing more things for magic. We have like kind of like a garden for food and stuff
Yeah.
like that, but I want to have like a proper, like witch's garden type thing
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
specifically like herbs and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally, totally. But I can imagine it would be like similar for wine as well because
Yeah.
you've been there throughout the process,
hmm
and I think that's where the potency is as well, because it's a different offering in the sense of like okay, you might work, get money, and use that money to go and buy an offering, right?
Yeah.
But that money can be used for pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Um, but wine that you've had a hand in the absolute creation of, or plants that I've had a hand in their whole life is it's a when you think about the offering, it's a much longer tail. It's a much longer
Hmm.
time commitment.
Oh yeah.
Um, I think that there's potency in that. I think there's weight in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I did one wine that I conscientiously made and even marketed as like talismanic, and it's called Road Opener. So it's
Really?
meant to be used as a road opener,
Yeah.
but the grapes were picked at a particular day and time, and then every step of the process. So like when it was pressed, there was certain incenses burned. I said something over the process. When it was bottled, like all these steps were just very intentional.
Yeah.
Um, and it was funny because I don't cross promote my projects. Like,
Hmm.
so my wine identity and my podcast identity are separate, mainly just because most of the people in the wine world would be just confused. I'm not like even embarrassed or anything. I just don't have to explain it. It's kind of where I'm
That's
at.
fair enough. Yeah, it's fair enough.
Yeah. And people have found out and I tell them then, but when they don't, I'm just like, I don't really feel like explaining this. But it's funny because if you read the write up for that release, it definitely is a lot more akin to my occult writing than my typical wine writing.
Yeah,
And the idea is that whenever a person buys this, if they're actually going to try to engage with it on a sort of magical level, because I'm selling this to non magical people for the most
sure.
part, I tell them like the whole idea is that you open the bottle, and I made a playlist to go along with it. So while you sit down, you have to drink the bottle in one sitting, ideally with at least one other person or a few people, and you have to talk about some sort of obstacle that you need to overcome. And by the time the bottle's done, through conversation, hopefully you've come to some sort of answer that wasn't there before to help you open that road.
That
And
is
I've actually like
awesome.
heard some good stories. Yeah.
That is awesome. That is so cool.
Yeah. That was fun. That's the most marriage of my two
Mm,
worlds I've had so
mm.
far.
I mean, that is such a superb example of what we're talking about, like of that difference in offering. Like that's
Hmm.
incredible. Throughout its entire lifespan of its creation,
Yeah.
it's been through that prism of magical practice. Awesome.
Yeah.
I kind of want one of those bottles now, dude.
It's hard to ship to the
Yeah,
UK,
yeah, I know.
man. If you come to the US for any
Yeah,
events, though,
yeah,
if you're doing like a book tour, I'll get it
yeah.
to your hotel room. You know what I mean?
I,
Yeah.
I, I hold you to that, man. That would be awesome.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I love it.
Oh, that's brilliant. That it's interesting that you road opener as well, because like one of the things that I make out of my herbs are road openers.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
cool. I
yeah,
love
road
it.
opener
That's one of the
blends. Yeah,
main like
yeah.
practical magic things I do,
Mm, mm,
honestly, besides like devotional or just spirit
mm,
contact. Like road openers to me are like essential in
yeah.
life.
Mm.
At least at this stage in my life. I don't know. Maybe eventually I won't need it as much. That sounds
Yeah,
great.
it's
But
a very practical tool, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah, it's been something I found very useful, and I tend to find after doing a proper like road opener ritual that there are very marketed results pretty shortly after in my life where I'm like, ah, got it, cool,
right.
thank you. Yeah.
What kind of like protocols do you use for road openers? Again, if that's something you don't want to share, that's fine.
uh, I probably share too much. I don't really have much of a filter, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, honestly, it's not that crazy. I feel like I've basically taken multiple other rituals I've read and kind of just stuffed them together.
right.
So
Yeah,
I'll do kind of the four directions, and I'll have kind of the small black spell candles. And then I'll get crossroads dirt to kind of connect them into a crossroads. In the middle, I'll have the 9-day novena orange candle. I'll dress it with oil. And then I probably read this somewhere, so I'm not trying to pretend I made this up, but maybe I didn't. I write down an obstacle for each direction that is something I'm particularly trying to work through, work
hmm,
past. And for the initial ritual, you know, I light the obstacle candles, the novena candle, and while the spell candles are burning, which can take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, I'm just circling the crossroads and focusing on each of the obstacles and describing how I want them to go away,
right.
imagining how they might go away, and just really trying to embody the feeling of that being different and changing and like what the results will be. And then when those are completely gone, I leave them there, and I leave that 9-day novena candle there for the 9 days, and at least daily come back and just spend time with it trying to kind of,
Mm.
again, focus on the results of these roads being opened. And then when it's all done, any excess material, so any wax, any of the dirt, I just kind of collect and I bury back at the crossroads and kind of see that as a completion. And doing that, but also, I guess the biggest idiosyncrasy would be inviting in my own spirit. So to that degree, it's a
Right.
unique thing
Yeah.
because I'm definitely talking to them throughout this process.
Right.
But maybe that is giving them what they need to help me do those things,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I'm trying to not wipe snot from my nose this whole time, obviously. So
Yeah, this I may need to do a road opener to get rid of this flu. Christ,
sinus opener.
yeah, this thing's hanging around like luggage.
We have the same thing. I think what you guys have over there right now is more intense, but we've been symptomatic for like a month. Me and my whole family just kind of switching things around. It's
yeah, that's like the timeline for sure. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Going back to Lee Morgan's work, I haven't read A Deep Without Name.
oh, it's so good.
Yeah,
I really recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it in the book that shifted things for you?
I haven't read it in a long time. I should honestly read it again because it's pretty short. It's not a huge book. I can remember vividly. I was on a work trip reading it, and I was in a hotel room in LA, and there was a rooftop pool. So this is the least witchy, magical place in the entire world. But I was like, well, I'm here anyways. I'm going to enjoy this. And despite being in this very non-spiritual, kind of hedonistic environment, I felt like I was reading a book I was meant to read a long time ago. And I was completely distracted from everything around me and just completely focused on it. And I mean, they aren't the only people to say this by any means. I mean, obviously, Emma Wilby goes into this a lot, but it's really that emphasis of an interpretation of the witch as, in some way, a shamanic type practitioner. And I know that word can be loaded in a lot of ways, but to me, it's really getting at this sort of animistic experiencing way of being that isn't really necessarily about the darkness or about some of the more aesthetic elements of witchcraft. It's this more, like we were saying earlier, visceral and engaged connection to a wider view of what it means to be a spirit in a body surrounded by spirits that are in the wider world, and I feel like they describe that in a way that is just very, very convincing to me that is maybe at the core of what we actually see in like the witch trial records, is a kind of demonized expression of what is otherwise just a pretty animistic spiritual experience. Whether these people are experiencing it against their will, potentially, maybe it's something that's just happening to them and then they're talking about it, or if it's something that they heard about from somebody else and they're being coerced into describing it that way. It's not even their own experience.
Right.
And for me, like what I call like an initiatic experience when I was 18, it was very much that. It was very harrowing and intense, and I felt a very strong sense for the first time in my whole life of my own individuality not being very, very, not feeling as much of an individual as I always was told I was, as society makes us think we are, feeling very open to everything around me, feeling like part of that experience was like I literally turned into an animal in my experience. And this was, not like a dream. It was something I actually saw happening to me, things like that. and then having what was like a disembodied voice speaking to me in my mind in very clear ways. When I read the way Lee describes this shamanic interpretation of witchcraft, it just felt so much like what I had gone through. And to me, it was something that I wouldn't necessarily say. I wouldn't say like it's not really about morality. It's just about being engaged with the wider world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. The morality thing is predominantly human, and not, it's not a construct that nature is under.
Yeah.
It just is. You know, the adage, like the tiger takes down the gazelle, is not evil. They just are a
Yeah.
tiger. It's really interesting to hear that you had that transforming experience, that
Yeah.
shifting. I think I've spoken about it on the show before, but I know I've had one too. And
Yeah.
the potency of them, how it feels is extraordinary. Like how it felt for me,
Mm-hmm.
anyway. I can't generalize, but where I could feel the feeling like the depth and shape of my body changing, and like this is
Mm-hmm.
all in deep trance, but
Yeah.
like that, I could feel the softness of the pads of
Hmm.
the wolf's feet, the wolf's
Mm-hmm.
paws as it touched the ground, but I could also feel its desire to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And like you could read, like it's almost like surrounded like a blanket. This desire
Hmm.
to hunt and eat. You know,
Yeah.
um, and it was weird because it's kind of like my consciousness was there. It was
Mm-hmm.
observing, but it was also still submerged into this animal instinct. Um, and it's an extraordinary thing, when you're
Yeah.
kind of weirdly merged, but you're separate, but kind of not. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
really, language is failing me to try and describe the sensation, but I was wondering, is there anything like that for you? It's a long time ago, and it might be difficult
It
to.
was, yeah. I was being embodying something that was not a predator, which is interesting. So I think inherently it would be somewhat of a different experience.
Mm,
But it was and in some ways it might relate. It's just hard for me to have been able to intellectualize it because it was this intense feeling of, I don't know. I would almost say it felt Kundalini like, even though I have not
yeah,
had a strong Kundalini experience,
yeah,
but hearing other people talk about it, because it felt like something, like almost like my body was not designed to feel it, and so it couldn't handle it. Because in real life when this was going on, my immediate reaction was to jump in the shower because I was trying to, like, almost like you would try to sober up by
yeah,
like
yeah,
like
yeah.
splashing your face with water.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, whatever's happening is like really not meant to happen to my body, and I jumped in the shower, and that did not help. And that's where like this transformation experience was happening. But yeah, it felt like a very just huge funnel of energy, which is interesting because the animal was a deer.
Wow.
And there is something about, honestly, I haven't intellectualized this till you asked this question, but there is something about the way deer move that is so almost surreal and powerful, but
Mm,
graceful, and
mm,
just like, it seems like the way they operate in the woods shouldn't be possible. Just like the ease and the
mm,
power with they can propel through things and above things. So it's possible that it actually is kind of related to what you were talking about, in that sense that I was
mm,
feeling this energy I couldn't process or something
mm,
like that.
mm.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, deer is super potent,
Yeah.
like a couple of the examples I given in the Dark Man is when he turned fairy women into deers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um,
I have to tell you now because it came up. So before that experience happened, it was on psilocybin, I'll be fair, but it was on a very small dose of psilocybin. Like I should not have been turning into a deer.
yeah, yeah.
Because I've done it before, I've done it since then. That doesn't really happen that way. But it was, I think the week before this happened, I had just moved into a studio apartment, and it was on the edge of the forest and right by the beach. It was a very cool apartment for an 18-year-old to have, I'll be honest. Um, and one night I woke up and it's one room. So, my bed was facing a window and that was kind of the whole room and the whole apartment. And I wake up and I'm kind of shocked and scared because I see like a horned thing in the window. So my just immediate human reaction is like, whoa, what's that? And then I realize it's a deer and I kind of calm down and I just take it in. And there's this deer with very dramatic horns just staring through the window at me while I'm sleeping. And my reaction is to take it in, and my immediate reaction was just like, oh, that's funny. I live in a place with deer now. This is a thing. Like, how funny. You live in the woods. Cool. And then I just go back to bed and don't even think about it. And I think I told some friends about it because isn't like just crazy thing happened last night. I saw something spooky and then realized it was a deer. And it wasn't till after the fact that I realized that, for one, the deer was very extremely large and the horns were super exaggerated. And now that I live where I do, I never see deer like this.
Right.
Almost never. It almost looks more like an elk. Like I've seen an elk that kind of has this vibe because they're very dramatic. There was no elk in this place. And also I could see it vividly and it was in the dark. So there was no lights in my room. There was no like porch light on. And I remember like details of it that were very clear. And then the last thing is, now I live in a place full of deer. Deer never just hang out and stare in your window. That is just not a thing they do, at least not in my experience.
They're very flighty.
Yeah. So looking back on it now, it took me a long time to even reconsider that experience and go like, wait a minute. And then within a week, I have this crazy vision of turning into a deer. Like, what? And so now it almost feels like one of those weird screen memory stories that you hear from like Mike Cleland or something, which opens up a whole can of worms about like alien experience in fairies and witchcraft. And it's like, oh boy, rabbit hole.
That sounds amazing. What an incredible experience.
It was weird. Yeah. In retrospect, it's pretty fun. At the time, it was not fun.
I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah. And is that an animal that you feel any kind of kinship with, or do you think that was just more of an initiationary experience to get you on the road, as it were?
I would say that in light of how significant all that was, it's not an animal that I work with very actively in my practice, like on a personal level. But it's interesting because my actual last name is Hines, which is like a hind, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And then we don't need to go down a huge UPG rabbit hole, but a really strong connection with like my primary spirit that I work with kind of meshes this expression of both Boan, the goddess from mythology, but also, interestingly, in light of what you've written, Sive from the Fenian cycle, and sees a kinship in their stories, particularly in relationship to the Well of Sagace in a weird way. And when you start talking UPG, it almost sounds like you're describing a weird dream because everybody else is like, well, how did you end up there? Yeah. But through a long period of time, it's become a way that this one spirit at least is trying to teach me something. So the deer is significant to that story for sure. And turning it into a deer is something that I find significant in my experience relating to Oshin, which I see as sort of like an ancestral expression of alchemical harmony or something like that I'm trying to be taught about.
Right.
If that doesn't sound like crazy word salad.
That's why my entire podcast is an
It's a
safe
good
space.
alternative name. Yeah.
That's super interesting. Like I kind of I remember when I kind of first made that connection with
Yeah.
the transformation into a deer, and then it coming up um in witchcraft and Scottish witch trials.
Yeah.
Um, um, excuse me. Um, that extraordinary connection really kind of blew my mind. Once you had that, once those links get made.
Yeah.
But this is it, isn't it? It's just kind of like leave your logic at the door. This is where folklore, and the
Mm-hmm.
folkloric mind and the dream mind is where that's the well we need to throw our bucket into to
Yeah.
try and make sense of things, but also just learn to think in that different way,
Yeah.
which is very hard for modern Westerns. We everything we're exposed to, everything we're exposed to, is teaching us to think the absolute other way. You know,
Yeah.
um, I think I've labeled them as being kind of like the organic and inorganic ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And John Moriarty has a lovely passage where he talks about kind of he plays on that kind of that polarization between the kind of the Fomorians,
Mm-hmm.
and the two of the Danann, those kind
Yeah.
of the inorganic and organic ways of
Mm.
thinking. You
Hmm.
know, and I used a quote in the book, which is from his book Invoking Ireland, where he talks about kind of like our way is now wholly Fomorian. That we've
Yeah.
shaped the earth to suit us. We
Mm-hmm.
don't shape ourselves to suit the earth. You know,
Hmm.
and I think that's almost, thinking about it now, is a really useful kind of like poetic talisman for witchcraft
Yeah.
in some way. You know.
Yes. 100%. Yeah. In some weird ways, like my own definition of witchcraft that I do not think is universal or needs to be adopted by other people. But for me, I've started to consider like a witch as an agent of right relation,
Mm,
which is not specific to humanity.
yeah.
It's bigger than that. And that if you then consider the witch throughout different periods of time, as right relation is further and further, well, as we get further and further from it, the witch is going to seem more and more an adversary to the world around it.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
And so, because like I said in the beginning, part of what I want to explore and why I've been asking certain questions on the podcast is to try to find, I wouldn't say the morality of witchcraft, but like the meaning, like something about it that I think is important and meaningful. And that's kind of where I've ended up, is there's something inherent to it, and maybe inherent to a certain degree of shamanism, that sort of thing, that is about seeking right relation and accepting our role as just one part of a whole. And
Mm.
so you describing that there about the Tuatha Danann and the Fomorians kind of like in a weird way taps into some of that concept, which I like.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's some avenues to pursue there. Um,
Yeah,
no, I'm really enjoying this conversation. This is yeah,
good. Hell
very
yeah, it's fun talking.
yeah, very insightful. Um, excuse me. Um, in terms of like the morality question,
Hmm.
Aidan Wachter often used the term kind of empire.
Yeah,
Actually, to be fair, Gordon White I think was saying
yeah,
that as well for a long time.
for sure.
And I think people, I think it's useful for us all to start to try and conceptualize what that means.
Yeah,
I think it's part of that kind of what is a witch's morality question.
yeah.
Or does it even count? Um,
Hmm.
because we're essentially in empire.
Yep.
You know, and it's a very hard thing to come out of unscathed, even if even if you kind of desperately want to develop
Yeah.
that different way of thinking, that organic way of thinking. Just like, our our kind of Christian symbolism, or whatever
Hmm.
religion you grew up in, symbolism is embedded. I think there's a huge amount of kind of empire thinking that's embedded as well.
Yeah. I mean, even no matter what I think on a personal level, my tax dollars are going to bombing people that I don't want to be bombed. Like that is
Yeah, yeah.
a part of my existence just by waking up in the morning and having a job, which
Mm,
that shows you how embedded we are.
mm,
It's it's almost, yeah, it feels very hard to untangle,
mm,
because it's so pervasive,
mm,
everywhere. But yeah, I definitely feel very very informed by Aiden in particular's expression of how he describes empire. I know Gordon talks about it too. And Aiden, I think he's talked about it publicly, but maybe it's on his Patreon. I can't keep track. But he talks about empire as maybe being almost like a parasitic impulse that has just exacerbated and started to grow and metastasize out. And that to me is that Formorian
mm,
impulse as well, which is so interesting. That just makes right relations seem impossible,
mm,
in the same way people describe the idea of a world without capitalism as seeming impossible. Like it
mm,
seems unimaginable for that to exist, which means it's like a very potent spell that we're all under. And
yeah,
I think that's an empire, that is a goal of empire to keep us under that spell, I should say.
yeah, yeah. Um, with the time we're living in now, we're seeing more of those um those spells fray. Those
Yeah, for
kind of like
sure.
unquestioned authorities,
Hmm.
unquestioned expertise. All of those
Yeah.
things are they're fraying at the edges.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we're going to see an awful lot of over the next couple of years before we round out the decade. Is
Yeah.
you know big institutions that were seen as sacrosanct, or that this is the way it is,
Yeah.
are going to fade away.
Yeah.
Maybe not fade away. It might crumble dramatically. Who knows? Like as we're in these interesting times. But I think we're going to see more
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. It's like a double-edged sword because on the one hand, I had a woman named Tegan West on a recent recording that's coming out soon, and she's an astrologer. So we were talking about 2026, and she has a more optimistic take of the future, I think, than a lot of people, which I enjoyed hearing. But yeah, we all seem to agree that the world's kind of in a shitty place,
Yeah.
like the way politics and the economy, all these things, we all seem so dissatisfied, almost no matter what end of the political aisle you're on.
Hmm.
So in some ways, the idea of going through like a tower period where everything falls apart is in some way all of us getting what we want.
Hmm.
It's just how uncomfortable will that process
Yeah.
be? you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the birth process, right?
Hmm.
It's like the giving birth bit
Yeah. Yeah.
is not easy.
Hmm.
Yeah, and well, you know, touch wood.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not too difficult, but equally, I think that there's a certain question about like individual, well, not necessarily individual, but community and family sovereignty. Of
Yeah.
like being able to do stuff for yourself and your loved ones and your friends. Um, that kind of shift in how society's changing is a good accelerant for. You know,
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I'm just talking about growing food or knowing my neighbors. Like
Yeah.
my neighbors being able to depend on me and me being able to depend on them. That kind of stuff. That's
Yeah.
what I mean. You know.
Yeah, I think the outcome of all the stuff we're going through in a macro way is almost certainly going to be good.
Hmm.
but it's kind of like resetting a broken leg. It's gonna hurt like hell in some way, even if it's just discomfort. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I don't
Yeah.
know what forms it's all gonna take.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think we have no choice but to see it as like a process we're all going through, that out the other end. You know, the only way out is through, and
Yeah.
once we get there,
Yeah. Yeah.
it'll be worthwhile. Hopefully, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and at this point, with how weird things have been for the past, I mean, definitely 5 years, but more than that,
Yeah.
it almost seems like, and I think a lot of people feel this. We're almost like, okay, on with it already.
Yeah.
Like, let's get fucking crazy. Let's get this
Yeah. Yeah.
done. Like, let's
Yeah.
reset this leg. I'm
Yeah.
tired of sitting here knowing it's coming. That's
Yeah.
kind of where I'm at now. I'm not as surprised by things anymore, and I'm not even super scared. I'm just kind of like, I know it's coming. Okay, what's it gonna be? Is kind of
Yeah.
where I'm at.
My brother, he's a very funny guy, and he dropped a great line on me once where he was just like, "Fucking longest apocalypse ever. How long is it going to take? Jesus, this
That
is like,
is perfect.
you know,
That is a perfect way to
you know,
say it.
um,
That's funny.
yeah, it's just like fuck. I'm just get on with it. Put us out of our
Yes,
misery, you know."
that is how I feel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Well, look, I think this seems like a natural place to wrap up. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, you too, man.
It's been great to have you on. As I said, I'm a big fan of what you do. I think your show's
Oh, thank
awesome.
you.
For anybody who wants to find out more about you, about your Substack, your podcast, where's the best place to do so?
Yeah, yeah. So we are Radical Elphame on all the podcasting platforms. You can find us there. And then the Substack is the Foliate Head. The only real social media I use is Instagram. So if you go on there, there's links to all of that. We do a little Patreon, which is mainly just kind of like bonus episode type things, extended conversations. Yeah, that's what we have going on right now.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on us on Spirit Box.
Hell yeah, thank you so much.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff. I took so much from Chad's experience, and I'm really grateful with what he shared with us. His experiences in the wild, and that threshold of where wilderness and magical intent meet, that threshold, I thought was fantastic. It's really one of the more exciting examples I think that I've had on the show, and I'm really grateful with him for his candidness in sharing those stories with us. And if you have stories like that, then I'd love to hear them. I'm really interested in not just people's experiences that have gone out to seek that engagement with the wild spirits of nature, but those of us that have stumbled upon them, that it's come to them rather than they've sought it out. I'm really interested in hearing those stories. So if you have good stories like that or experiences you'd like to share them, do feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty easy to find on Instagram, so do consider that because I'm really interested in hearing those stories. If you want to find out more about Chad's work and follow the excellent Radical Elfheim, then again, check out the show notes. The links are all there. And I'm going to leave it there. First show of 2026 down. Take care. Talk soon. Bye.